Hi, good afternoon. This is Meredith Lego, and I'm doing a series of videos on Ascension science. A lot of the content that I'm bringing forward has been teachings, if you will, of Ascension mechanics that I've been offered from different extra or intra-dimensional beings who I'm able to tap into through a channeling process, which in meditation or shortly after meditation, I'm basically in the right brainwave length frequency in order to connect with them consciously. I get a lot of the information through telepathic messages, which I hear clairaudiently, or downloads, which I'm impulsed to sort of transcribe through automatic writing. A lot of the content has basically built upon itself, like almost like a textbook of foundational knowledge about the quantum field and how it starts to work, and then how thoughts really begin to form the manifestation of reality. And if you're new to this particular video and you watch it and end up resonating with the content, I would encourage you to go back to the very first videos, because as I mentioned before, a lot of the content starts to build on itself. So I'm going to start getting back to sharing some learnings that I received from a being called Ascended Master Hilarion, who most of the content has been coming from. In this particular video, he's going to go into, again, the importance about managing and mastering the mental body, which is so key to our experiences we're going through this, because Ascension is really about the continued evolution of consciousness, and probably about 90 to 95% of it is gaining mastery or control, especially where we are as a human race, gaining mastery and control over our emotional and our mental bodies. When we do that, we start to slowly dislodge blockages that exist within our mental, emotional, and physical and etheric bodies. And when we do that, we allow more light to essentially be accreted into our physical DNA, and we're able to carry a lot more information codes that are coming in from source energy. So with that, let me switch gears here and start to share with you the message that I got. Again, this is coming from Ascended Master Hilarion. Cycles of time move in waves. They come in subtle impulses of energy, charged with signals to make the impossible possible and manifest physical reality from thought forms. All around you, physical objects exist, but only as a physical reality from the original thought projection. Everyday objects are a reflection of the thought projection of an individual or group consciousness unbounded into view of the scenes. So I'm going to pause right there. So what he basically is doing is kind of taking the lesson back to a lot of the content that I shared in the very first few videos. And this particular channeling that I did was in April of 2021, so it was almost a year ago, but it was probably 2 or 3 years from the point that I actually had started channeling him. So again, he's basically saying that reaffirming, he doesn't say it here, but I'll kind of go back to it. So we essentially live in a quantum holographic construct, if you will. And by doing that, we're essentially projecting, if you will, into what seems to be very physical, tangible form, is really a projection of our thoughts and our intentions, and especially when they're backed up with emotional frequency, that even charges it even more. But essentially what we see on the outside is very much a reflection of what we are on the inside. And a lot of the projection comes almost from within the DNA as well. So if you kind of think about a hologram will contain the whole. So even if you, for example, were to cut up a small hologram image into smaller pieces, it still contains the whole within it. So that's essentially what's happening, and we're projecting through our thoughts. He goes on to say that thought projections are the most important aspect of the earth plane. They are the subject of your learning classroom. To master the mental thought is so critical, for without mastery, passage to the next level of advancement is not possible. Hold a stillness in the mind, a neutral position, an image, while in meditation. Do not deviate or let the mind wander. This lesson shows the masters and guides of your readiness for passage. And I'm going to pause right there. They're going to answer why that's important, but I just want to give you my perspective. So essentially, we again, they're continuing to say, or Hilarion's continuing to stay in this particular, subparagraph, if you will, that mastery of the mind, mastery of thought is so important. And when you can get to the point where you're going through life, getting control of your thoughts, and in this particular case, I believe he's making strong reference to the ego personality construct. When you can start to do that and take more of a neutral position emotionally around events and thoughts that are going on within you, you're going to put yourself to be more in a 0 point emotionally as you're going through life. And that, in fact, will provide readiness for passage. Oftentimes, it's through the mastery and gaining more control and more neutrality of the emotional body and more mastery of sort of the mental body, in which case you're able to sort of not allow like emotional blockages or energies to build up inside of your body. And by doing so, you can start to release some of the DNA codes that have been dormant within us, and that can actually start to turn on additional gifts. So when they talk about readiness for passage, I don't think it's necessarily that they're providing the readiness, but the fact that you're able to essentially accrete more light into your DNA, and by doing so, you're able to turn on, or those codes are turning on more of the capabilities which we naturally have and always have had as human beings, but we forgot it, and because we forgot it, we lost our ability to do a lot of things that we naturally should be able to do, and these things are slowly coming back into humanity. So these would be certain psychic sensitivities that we should be able to have, telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance, those types of things. So let me go on with what Hilarion said. So again, he said, this lesson shows the masters and guides of your readiness for passage. And then he says, and why may you ask? In the next level of advancement, there is less time between thought and reality. In those higher dimensions, manifestation is instantaneous and impacts the collective. Therefore, only the worthy are allowed. For you don't want a being thinking of unsavory, type thoughts, because it will occur. A vision for the best and highest good of all involved must be in the thought, mental, mind, and capacity. So I'm going to pause right there. So essentially, this goes back to some of the early videos that I did maybe in the 1.0 series around the quantum field and manifestation. But essentially, what he's saying is that, if you're thinking about things that aren't, particularly in the best and highest good for humanity, when we start to go into higher dimensions, the time space, or the space and time between your thought and the actual experience of that starts to compress or collapse in on itself. So time space starts to collapse, and you start to literally manifest almost in the moment. And I've seen myself go through that a lot more, especially when my vibrational rates are a lot higher, is that I'll have a thought and it'll immediately happen. Just as an aside, last week at work, I do a lot of work in finance and strategy, but last week I happened to be working on an Excel file, doing a kind of complex formula, and the formula or the file wasn't working, and I thought, I really could use some help right now. I wasn't going to go action that because I wanted to see what happened, but interestingly enough, this file happened to be in a shared space within my company's kind of shared drives, if you will. And for whatever reason, the most gifted data scientist, so this is like a data scientist inside my company, happened to be in my file, even though he had absolutely no reason to. And when I saw him there, I pinged him and said, oh, you're just the person that I needed to talk to. And he actually helped me solve my issue. So that was an awesome manifestation. Because it came to me. I didn't have to take action on actioning that. Now, I'm not implying that we go through life without having to action, because we do. It takes both sort of the drawing in of impulses and energy, and then you have to take action on it. That's really the good balance between sort of electrical and magnetic energies. But that's kind of an example of, not having to plan or go seek. It came to me. So what they're saying is that essentially, as we go into higher dimensions of consciousness, those manifestations start to come faster, and they can start to play out in real form. And so, in past videos, I think I use the example, like, I wouldn't want to be thinking about a gorilla, with a chainsaw and have that kind of manifest, because it wouldn't be great for the beings that are around for that manifestation to take form. So obviously we need to be in a place where our thoughts and intentions are for the best of, and the highest and best good of all, because within that, obviously the gifts start to kind of turn on a little bit more, and guides and whatnot obviously support that process that starts to happen within us. Now, it's not usual that those gifts will turn on with individuals who might not have savory thoughts and intentions, because it's likely they haven't done the inner work to remove blockages, unless they're working within dark arts or magic, which is possible, unfortunately. So within that, I asked a question after Hilarion basically provided that content, and I asked, what is in the best and highest good? What if the best and highest good involves a lesson of suffering for advancement? Death can bring rebirth. So I asked that question because I think at the time, this was, as I mentioned, about a year ago, so it was April 2021. Again, there was a lot still going on with the pandemic, and I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that, oftentimes death is a part of the learning process. And while none of our ego personality wants to see that occur to anybody in our circle of reality, let alone the population, it obviously is a normal part of the cycle of life. And so I was asking about that, and Hilarion basically said, this is so in the lower planes, as the lessons in extreme polarity are needed to advance the breaking points in the tension. For tension will create a snapback to the central point or 0 point, but will further advancement of the being. When a space of 0 point is achieved within, more skills are provided or turned on. When they are, they must be respected for their raw power and ability to create physical outcomes in the physical projection. So again, what he's basically saying, that again, we're in a lower, all things are relative. There's not good or bad. We're just in a plane of consciousness. So our identity is tuned into a level of consciousness in which we're experiencing more extreme forms of polarity between different energies, electric and magnetic. And there's a lot of tugging and tension that goes on between those different polarities, and we see it and we feel it in our lives all the time. We see it play out in society and certainly on the news, if you watch that. So essentially, the advancement starts to occur when you start to take more of an observer view through that world of polarity, and start to achieve more of a 0 point within your emotional body, and not necessarily judge every single situation that you're going to encounter. Now, that's really hard, especially when a majority of humanity is having their buttons pushed intentionally, in order to take sides. But again, taking an observer view and having compassion for those who are doing it, because they may not be understand the impulses that are driving them to do these things. They may not understand that there could be past sort of reasons as to why they're doing these things from past lives even, and that there's a lot of healing that needs to go on there. So essentially they're saying is that when you start to get to that point, these skills begin to turn on more, and when they do, hopefully you're in a place where you've got this sort of level of spiritual maturity in order to respect the raw power that they provide, because they can create physical outcomes and the physical projection. He goes on to say that all dimensional planes have an essence of physicality to the patrons of the plane. So for example, members of the 12th density reality will not be visible to you, for they move at very high speeds, but the reality will be physical. It is no different than your travels to other dimensions at night during dream time or astral time. In that reality, you perceive the world as physical. And when you are conscious or lucid to that understanding, you have the ability to instantaneous manifestation of your physical reality. For example, you move from location to location with thought alone, or you change the outcome of an experience of the clothes on your quote-unquote physical body. Remember, it's an illusion of a holographic image projected through the mind. And so in this particular case, again, he's talking about the importance of manifestation into physical reality. And he brings up the fact that in other dimensional planes, the beings that reside within those planes, whether dimensions or densities, what they experience can be the perception of very physical reality to them, because again, they're viewing things through a thought projection in their higher vibrational or higher octave plane. So we can't necessarily, let's say a higher density being is in our space, we can't necessarily see it because they're just vibrating at a higher vibrational frequency or octave, just like we can't see different forms of light with our senses right now. That's kind of what he's implying here. What he also says is that they're moving at very, very high speeds, and that's really why we can't see it. I think a great analogy for that would be like a fan. I've actually got one going over my head right now as I'm sitting outside, but when the fan's going super, super fast, you can't actually see the blades within the fan. It gets to the point that you can't even see the blades at all. But when the fan starts to slow down, you start to see each individual fan of its own accord. And essentially that's the same thing in terms of being able to physically see beings at different sort of dimensions and densities. So what he's saying is that, look, even in their reality, they're still manifesting through thought and through consciousness. And he was bringing up an analogy for me that during dream time, sometimes I have the ability to become lucid in the dreams, and I've also had the experience of being able to go out of body, or it's not even astral projecting, but it's truly going out of body during nighttime. And it's more of a bilocation experience because I'm aware of this physical reality at the same time I'm having an experience of going out of body, so I'm in fact bilocating. But when that happens, and I'm very conscious that that's happening, you have the ability to sort of manage your reality through thought, and it happens very instantaneously, especially in those dimensional planes. So when I'm bilocating, if I think of going to a certain destination consciously, I am there like instantaneous. If I think about, especially in dream time, if you become lucid and you kind of master that situation, you can literally change the reality instantaneously. So he's just reminding us of that fact. He goes on to say that you are now in a place of mental school. The key is to master the mental body, for brothers and sisters in the higher planes don't want to experience an unpleasant physical holographic reality founded on a vibrational place of fear, hatred, or vengeance. So again, just as a reminder, 90 to 95% of our ascension experience for most of humanity right now is mastering the emotional and mental bodies. And with that, I would encourage you to go back to the series of videos that I did on stages of ascension. And why? Because our brethren out there in other planes or dimensions and densities, want to make sure that as we're manifesting it, we're doing it with the highest thoughts of good and love for all, because they don't want to experience what we manifest with our consciousness. And then I asked Hilarion, what exercises can be done to master the mental body? Here, he actually provided one, and then I think I had to go make dinner for the family or something like that. But he basically said, tantric breathing is a start. Relax the body and mind. Imagine images which are a point of joy, a higher resonance, and the move into nothingness. The training in transcendental meditation is also a right practice. So that was the end of the session, but just to back up a little bit, interestingly enough, the first thing he mentioned was tantric breathing, and that was something he'd never brought up to me before, but I think it was just the idea of just sort of having conscious breathing, breathing in, sort of achieving the still point on the breath, and then breathing out. So again, the idea of consciously breathing in order to reach a state of relaxation and start to slow down the mind. And then obviously he did bring up the idea of imagining images that bring you lots of joy and passion, because during that process you can start to change the emotions that are going on inside of your body, let your body relax a little bit more, which starts to increase the vibrational frequency of your mental, your emotional, and your physical body simultaneously. And then finally, he did bring up transcendental meditation. So if you haven't heard about that, that's basically a technique of meditation, again, in order to sort of entrain your mind to stop thinking about all the stuff that's going on in your life, and you just kind of focus on a certain word that you actually don't know the meaning of, and you kind of say it over and over and over again. And when your mind starts to wander, you go back to that word, and then slowly you'll even forget the word, and you'll just be in complete stillness. So that's a particular meditative practice that I was taught, but it was nothing more than a method to help me start to gain more mastery of my mind over the period of meditations, so that I could achieve true quiet and be able to just tune into myself. And then through that process, I started to tune into others as well. And so that's really what he offered in this particular channeling. I know I've been spending a little bit more time on this particular session, but again, I thought it was an important lesson about the importance of mastering the mental body, because it's so important during this period of time for our ascension process. The emotional and mental / ego personality construct mastery becomes so important, because again, it'll remove blockages of trapped energies within all of your bodies, and by doing that, you'll be able to create more flow of energy within your bodies, and will begin to start to sort of unpack or unrelax DNA within your body, and then begin to kind of unleash locked DNA that might be stored there, that has codes from the past, and or enabled you to flow in more energy that's coming in from light codes from the sun, or for other universal sources that has information that could help us advance our consciousness as well. And that's important because now we're in sort of a period of time where that's starting to happen more and more. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and I send you my love and continued hope that this information is helping you on your ascension journey. Thanks very much. Bye.